Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 44 of D.A.R.C, or Does Anyone Really Care? The review series where we're highlighting underappreciated cars from Gran Turismo 6 that really deserve to be used more than most people think. So in this episode we're featuring the Spoon Fit, which is of course a Honda Jazz, or Honda Fit depending on what country you're in, which is modified to endurance racing specifications. So, it's not exactly an exciting looking car. I mean, it is a racing car, but it is one of the lowest PP and lowest power racing cars in the game. But what does it have to offer? Because Spoon clearly saw enough value in this car to turn it into a racing machine, so it must be good for something. Well, fully tuned, this car sits at 437 pp, which is, as we said, pretty low for a racing car. And at that point, it's producing 205 brake horsepower, which is a pretty decent amount of power for a little Honda Jazz, especially a slightly older shape Honda Jazz. And it weighs in at 890 kilos, so it's fairly lightweight as well. It's not the lightest of hatchbacks, but it is fairly light, around the same kind of weight as a K car. Now it does cost 50,000 credits, so as far as hatchbacks go, it is pretty expensive, especially for a low grade hatchback. But at the same time, this is a fully fledged racing model, so 50 grand isn't really that bad for a racing car. But for a 50 grand, 205 horsepower hatchback, what does it have to offer? Well, the great thing about this particular racing model is that it's great for low PP racing. Now that may sound fairly obvious, but just because a car has a low PP doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good. It may just be slow. But this car is pretty quick for its PP. Now I wouldn't necessarily recommend using it at its maximum PP of 437. I would, however, recommend using it maybe for 400 or 425, or maybe even a bit lower, maybe even 375. Because it does have a decent amount of power for its PP level. The handling, as you'd expect from a car which already has good handling that's then turned into essentially a touring car, it has very, very good handling. Now it's a front wheel drive car, but it has tons of grip. There's very minimal understeer, if any at all, depending on how you tune it. And it's really great to drive. It's very beginner friendly, very, very easy to drive. You can take corners at very high speeds. The brakes are very good. And overall, it's just a very usable package. Now, as we said, it is expensive. So if you're looking for purely a quick little hatchback, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for that, because there are hatchbacks and hot hatches that you can get with more power than this for far less money. But if you're looking for a low-level official racing model for low PP racing, this car is definitely worthy of your consideration, because for low PP racing, it's really good. Its straight line performance is actually far more sprightly than you'd think. It's definitely not a slow car, despite its low PP. And at the end of the day, 205 horsepower, although it may not sound a lot, for a Honda Jazz, that's quite a lot of power. That's almost the same power as something like a Lancia Delta, in a car which weighs less than a Delta and is significantly smaller in proportions. Now, in terms of when I'd recommend using this car, well, I already said I'd recommend using it for low PP, but more specifically, I'd recommend using it probably on city tracks, because of its narrow body and the very good turn-in that this car has in corners. But I'd also recommend it for tracks that are quite twisty, and tracks where the high average speed that you can maintain with this car, because of how good the handling is, gives you an advantage, such as the Nürburgring Ring. Now obviously this isn't going to beat Evos around the Nürburgring Ring, but for its PP, this car can take corners at a much higher average speed than your average road-going small hatchback. So for, as we said, low PP racing on twisty tracks or city tracks, or anything that really involves its handling an advantage in grip and brakes, not that you actually have to use the brakes that often, but any kind of track that involves utilising those things, that is what I would recommend this car for, because for those things it is very good. And it has that kind of rarity factor, because you don't really see that many people using this car, or I don't anyway. So that's it for this review. I would definitely recommend you guys trying out this car at least once. And that's it for this episode, so I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.